If you're new here, I'm RJ. This is my channel. Sometimes I talk about things like Alabama chasing Ohio State at #1 in the 2021 recruiting rankings. I know, right? Big deal, because there's a lot of people that, freak with the channel. It's like, yo, RJ, what happened to OU? Yes, hello, it's still there. Talk a lot about Ohio State because Ohio State's got 305 points in July before the season starts and 19 commitments in the boat. And they're all really good. I've talked to a bunch of them. They're good kids too. But when you look at what Alabama's been able to do here of late, and you see Terrence Ferguson, my God, J.C. Latham, Tommy Brockermeyer, James Brockermeyer, and then you add to that, I made a video back in April mocking Nick Saban in Alabama because they were ranked 55th in the 247 Sports Composite Team rankings. Now they're ranked near the top. I think they're right there at #5. Let's do some producing on the show right quick, because that's the way that everybody wants to do this. RJ wants to show up here and start talking without a rundown because that's what he does. And now we're talking about Alabama being ranked inside the top 10 for sure, but like where in the top 10? Because I think they're at like #5 right now, which is stupid. No, they're not that high. They're not that high. Okay. They're at 2! My God! I forgot this. Ohio State at 1, Alabama at 2, Oregon at 3, Tennessee at 4 with 23 commits in the boat. They're going to keep sliding just because they're, the quality and the quantity. Yeah. LSU at 5, USC at 6, Carolina at 7, Michigan at 8, Clemson at 9. Speaking of which, we got a interview going up on Sunday at noon with Barrett Carter, who is committed to the 2021 recruiting class for Clemson. Best friends with Jordan Hancock, who recently decommitted from Clemson and committed to Ohio State. Talk a little bit about that, so be sure to tune in. Number 10, Florida. And then at number 12, you got Texas. Number 13, you got Oklahoma. Now, Tristan Lay figures into all of this because Tristan Lay dropped the top 5 that included LSU, Alabama, Oklahoma, Ohio State, and Clemson. And spoiler, when I talked with Barrett, he's like, yeah, we're recruiting Tristan Lay. We're recruiting Nolan Rucci. These are guys that we absolutely want. And then you look at what Alabama has done, and you look at the classes they put together. And I'm going, wait a second. Is this the greatest recruiting class at offensive line that Nick Saban has ever produced? Turns out, folks over at 247 Sports' Bama affiliate, Bama Online, have already done that work. And check this out. They got a current offensive line average prospect ranking of 97.13. Like, what? The 2019 class was elite. That was Evan Neal, that was Pierce Quick, that was Amari Kite, that was Darian Delcourt, and Tanner Bowles. That was 95.39 was the ranking there on average. So we're talking about the highest average that we had ever seen in the Nick Saban era for an offensive line class, right? That routinely is around 93, 92%. And now we're talking about with just 2 signees, with 4 signees, having a higher average. And if you get to add Tristan Lay to that, that's 3 5-star offensive tackles. Now, offensive tackles don't move the needle much for anybody. I understand that. I get that. But if you're looking for which teams are going to win championships, you can look at where the best defensive tackles are going and where the best offensive tackles are going, which is why the J.C. Latham thing still reverberates to this day, him picking Alabama over Ohio State. Wow. Right? Because they thought that they perhaps had J.C. Latham really was a shoo-in. And in being a shoo-in, probably lost him. But that's okay. Because they're in on Tristan Lay. And they need another top offensive tackle. They need at least one to join this class. It's like the only thing they really don't have that they want, 5-star offensive tackle, right? They got the best offensive guard in the country in Donovan Jackson. But you know what? Alabama got the second best offensive guard in the country in Terrence Ferguson. Which leads me to this other point that I wanted to bring up here. What the hell is happening in Georgia? Because I'm used to Kirby Smart being able to lock down the state of Georgia, and yet Barrett Carter's going to Clemson, Jordan Hancock's going to Ohio State, Terrence Ferguson's going to Alabama. He better get Amarius Mims August 15th when he announces. Otherwise, there's going to be some consternation in Athens. And for good reason, because Kirby Smart needs to be able to build his football teams from the state of Georgia. Not just for the reasons that I believe, which is that you got to lock down your home state, period, but because Georgia now produces the second most blue chip recruits in the country. The second most. That's behind Florida, which is another place they got to go down and get dudes, right? So the idea that you continue to lose guys to Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson is not a good look, especially when you're trying to compete for championships. That said, Georgia's won 2 of the last 3 recruiting national championships, right? And they're splitting them basically with Alabama. So we also know that, and we know that Kirby Smart can go into Alabama's coffers and go get what he wants, right? He flipped Carson Beck. He flipped Jake Fromm. He'll probably flip some more, right? That said, Ohio State seems to be so far ahead in all of this. And yet, if they don't win Tristan Lay, and Tristan Lay goes to Alabama, there's a real opportunity here because the Jalen Milroe thing is real. All right? So he lost a 4-star quarterback in Drake May to North Carolina. Cool. Legacy happens. And at one point, there's only one commit in the 2021 Alabama class. That was Deontay Lawson. Okay? That's why they were ranked so low. And now you might be able to add yet another offensive tackle who knows the numbers because 10 of the last 12 offensive tackles that started for Alabama have been drafted, most in the first round, right? We expect Alex Leatherwood to be 11 out of 13 next year. And we also expect them to compete for a national championship. At least I do. I picked them to win a national championship back in January. I see no reason to back down from that. The only team that actually scares me a little bit in preseason is Ohio State, right? For reasons that you all understand. But the thing about Ohio State that I shudder to think about for them is what happens if Justin Fields go down. You don't really want to throw C.J. Stroud or Jack Miller into the fire. That's not what you want to do. But if Bryce Young ends up winning the job, you can go to a Mac Jones. If Mac Jones wins the job, you can go to Bryce Young. They have contingencies at Alabama that they just don't at Ohio State. And what I come to find out is in November, December, it matters who the backups are. It matters what your depth looks like. So that's one other thing to keep it in there, right? The other part about this that I find to be really interesting is LSU. Because, you know, with the re-rankings and whatnot, Rajon Davis goes from 5-star to 4-star. But they got like 13 4-stars in the class. Another of which is Corey Kiner, running back out of Ohio. And they hope to add at least one more. Meanwhile, I'm looking at Oklahoma, Texas, outside the top 10. Could change. But for Texas, who is about to get rated, or so it looks like, right? Could happen, could not happen, with Milroe. And then there's a top athlete prospect that you really want, right? Billy Bowman if you're Oklahoma, but you want to keep him if you're Texas, coming out of, oh my goodness, out of Denton Ryan, where that dude has been stupid awesome. But also, what is LSU going to be this year? Because I could just easily see that class falling apart. You know, if you want to talk about just what their season might look like, I've said they could catch 5 losses this year. I still think they could catch 5 losses this year. However, Eric Gilbert was just named National Gatorade Player of the Year yesterday. And that's after catching more than 100 passes for like 1,700 yards at Marietta and leading them to their first state championship since the 60s. That means that when LSU and Texas play, we hope, you're talking about the National Gatorade Player of the Year in 2019, the National Gatorade Player of the Year in 2020 facing off against each other. Jake Smith is that dude in 2019. And oh, by the way, he was National Gatorade Player of the Year and Arizona Gatorade Player of the Year the same season that Spencer Rattler was a senior at Pinnacle. Now, his season was cut short for some undisclosed reason at Pinnacle that he violated some sort of school policy, and that ended his high school career. But you can't argue with white chocolate out there at Austin. Jake Smith is that dude, all right? The way people were talking about Christian McCaffrey, imagine if Christian McCaffrey was playing slot. That's what you're going to get in Jake Smith. Now, with Eric Gilbert at 6'5", 255, you know exactly what that is. That is a matchup nightmare. And apparently the only dude in the class that was able to, you know, mitigate the damage he could do to your defense was Keely Ringo. Where is he? Georgia. I'm not exactly sure whether or not that dude's going to be allowed to play corner, if they're going to move him to safety, or they're going to move him to linebacker, because he's just overgrown. But I'm excited to watch this 2020 class. That said, as the race continues for 2021, seeing how quickly Alabama vaulted to number 2 is the reason why Ohio State is is on watch, right? Because the way that they were able to just make it happen, Charles Huff just out here doing the damn thing, Kyle Flood out here doing the damn thing, Pete Golding out here doing the damn thing, and then you got Nick Saban on the FaceTimes, you can understand how this thing gets a little wonky. You can understand how this thing turns out to be pretty doggone interesting once we get into the nitty-gritty as the kids continue to make their decisions based on Zoom calls. That's where we're at right now.